Hi, I'm Malcolm Stern, and in conjunction with my friends John and Sandra Wilson from Online Events, we're creating a series of podcasts called Slay Your Dragons with Compassion. My book of the same name was conceived and inspired by the suicide of my daughter Melissa and the journey that took me on and the internal resources that I found. All of my guests will have a story to tell around overcoming and ultimately thriving through adversity. Special thanks to the band Stairway, Jim McCarty and Louis Chinamo, for the use of theme music from their album Medicine Dance, and my engineer Owen Santiago. I hope you enjoy this series, and thanks for listening. So, welcome to my podcast, Slay Your Dragons with Compassion, which I'm doing in conjunction with my friends John and Sandra Wilson at Online Events. And we have a range of ordinary and extraordinary. And I think everybody actually is extraordinary. Everyone has a story to tell, and we've all been molded by the experiences that have happened to us. So I'm very glad to welcome Camilla Balshaw today to our podcast. Hi,
Thank
Camilla.
you. Hi, Malcolm.
Yeah, and we don't know each other very well. Camilla came to me through Jenny Boyd, who was with the Beatles in India with when they were seeing the Maharishi, and Camilla is a writer and a yoga teacher, and of course you met Jenny originally through giving her yoga classes.
I did, yes. And
Yeah.
then we decided we wanted to become friends. I
Ah,
teach her yoga after all.
fair enough. That's great. And
Tip,
so we were talking a little bit about what's shaped you, and I think what often shapes us in our early days is our upbringing. And you were brought up in Luton, and presumably a reasonably happy childhood until you were about 6 or 7, and then your parents divorced. And I
Yeah,
think what's interesting in there, I mean, interesting is horrible because it's really about, these are the struggles we go through, is that you didn't see your dad for another 40 years after your parents divorced.
that's right. So yes, so I grew up in Luton, the epicenter of the world. And yeah, I did have a happy childhood. So my mum is Jamaican, my dad Nigerian, which was quite an unusual relationship and in that time. Jamaicans very different to Nigerians in terms of culturally, in language, background. So it was quite an unusual union. Um, I don't actually know how they met. That's kind of shrouded in mystery. My dad came from a very wealthy Nigerian family and was sent over to the UK to study. And my mum was from quite a rural working class background in Jamaica. And she came over to the UK in 1959, and my dad came over earlier than that, obviously, to study. And then they met. The circumstances of their meeting, I really don't know. My mum doesn't really talk about it. But she said, it's always interesting because she said my dad charmed her, that he was very charming and dashing. So I guess he swept her off her feet, and they subsequently had 3 children. I'm the youngest. And I don't remember. I mean, my dad wasn't around. I mean, he was a presence in the house, but he wasn't around much. My dad, when he first came to the UK, he had an allowance from his mum. And I think that stopped after he decided that he was never coming back to Nigeria. And he just was, I think his head was swayed by the bright lights of London.
Sure.
And I don't think he wasn't prepared to be a father or a husband, actually. And I think he enjoyed parties, whiskey, late nights, probably other women. And so he was a very shadowy presence. I just remember he used to smoke cigarettes, a particular brand, I think Carlton Long. And I always remember the smell of cigarettes, and my dad had been in the room, or he used to read the Times newspaper. And I remember him as a very tall, elegant man, but he just wasn't around much. He was a very shadowy, in and out figure. And I think it got to the point with their relationship when my mum just had enough and
Mm.
started divorce proceedings, and he left. And then initially he had a flat in London, and we did occasionally see him in London, and then they just sort of slowly pitted out. And then he went back to Nigeria, and that was it. And I was about, yeah, the last time I saw him, maybe around 7, 8, the last time I saw him. Um, and I think at the time, you're quite resilient as a child. And I just sort of got on with life without a dad. But I always sort of felt, um, did I ever want to contact him? Why didn't he contact me? You know, there were questions there. And I didn't want to ask my mother because obviously they had a very acrimonious divorce. And my mum subsequently remarried. So he was just kind of erased from my life. And also his culture, so Nigerian culture was erased from my life.
Now that's quite interesting when we get a cultural sort of dead subtraction from our lives, and
Yes.
that makes a difference. And your stepfather, the man your
Yeah.
mum married, what was he like as a father or as a father figure?
Hands off. I mean, John had a family, and so we never called him dad. We always called him by his first name, John. And he was quiet, a very quiet presence. He was Jamaican, very light skinned Jamaican. So initially, I think when my mum started going out with him, I thought he was white. And he was, but then he had an incredibly strong Jamaican accent. So you had this white looking guy. I mean, there are white Jamaicans, obviously, now I know that. But at the time, it was like, whoa, it was really interesting that his voice was strong Jamaican patois and very light skin. And he was very quiet. Um, he also, you know, liked to drink, but wasn't particularly. We didn't see him as our dad, and we never called him dad. He was always John.
Right. And what's quite interesting is that often what we do is we tend to marry or get together with someone either in our father's image or the opposite of our father's image. And it
Yeah,
sounds like in some ways you had an opposite pole with your father and your stepfather, a very charming, charismatic, sort of
yeah,
gregarious man, and then a very quiet, sort of solid man.
yes.
And I wonder what you're married now, I
I
believe.
am. Yes,
And
yes.
I wonder who you've married and
I've
how
married
that
Michael, and he's
relates.
nothing like either of them. Mike's from up north. Mike's from Blackpool. We met when we were at university, and yeah, Mike's a gregarious character, but he is a thoughtful, kind, loving, very present person. The complete opposite of my dad and John. So you know, he's very much his own person. And I've been with Mike for over 30 years. So yeah, that's interesting for me that they're very different to my dad.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
completely different character.
And is your dad still alive now?
He's not. My dad died. So basically, I didn't hear from my dad, as I said, for 40 odd years. And then in 20, 2014, I got a phone call, an out of the blue phone call from a cousin, um, saying or telling me that my dad wanted to get in contact. I didn't know I had a cousin, and he was going to be the go between us. Um, so that was a shock after so long. I It took a long time to process the fact that my dad wanted to contact me again, and I decided I wanted to have a relationship with my cousin, not my father. So
Was there some anger and resentment there? I mean,
anger,
there's bound to
resentment,
be. Yeah.
also because of my mum. I thought that you know, it was unfair on her, really. I think because my mum, I was brought up, you know, with my mum being the matriarch and the patriarch. And you know, when you've got a single mother, although she had John when they got married, it felt very much like my mum was, you know, she was everything to us
Yes,
because she
yes.
was up. And so I kind of didn't want to upset her. So initially, I just met my cousin. It's lovely, really interesting guy, and we really got on. And then things kind of shifted, and my father started. He gave my cousin a letter that he'd written, and we started a tentative relationship's too strong a word. We started a tentative getting to know one another
Right.
process, which I write about in my book. And um, yeah, and then it was also quite interesting because I didn't mention this before, Malcolm, but growing up, I was known by two different names. So I think I mentioned at the beginning that Jamaican culture and Nigerian culture have very different naming traditions. So my dad is Yoruba Nigerian, and to them, naming children should have meaning. Names have a story. There is a whole history around how you name a child. Whereas for my mum, she was brought up in Jamaica under a colonial, rule, and names in Jamaica were very British sounding, you know. So my mum wanted to call me Mandy. She wanted to call my sister Sarah and my brother Tony. But my dad registered their names. My brother was Abdul Babatunde, which is very
Slightly
uh,
different. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
very different to Tony. And my sister was Aduni, and I was Camilla, but that was spelt should have been spelt Kamillah, or
Right.
sometimes there's a T at the end, Camilla. But I think the person who registered me just thought it's Camilla. Let's write it the
It's a
classical.
lovely name as well.
It
So,
is a lovely name. But my
yes.
mum hated it and she didn't want us to have these Nigerian sounding names. So she obviously was very upset with my dad and she decided that she wouldn't call me Camilla and she liked the name Mandy. So I was called Mandy up until about the first 24 years of my life.
Mm.
And that's something, again, I discuss in the book. And then when I met my dad, he actually didn't call me Camilla. He called me Amanda. He never really called me Mandy. Um, and when we were first contacting one another, it was a really big thing for me to say, look, my name is Camilla. You gave me the name. That is my name. I'm Camilla now. Once I'd reclaimed it, again, which I talk about through the book around naming and
Well, that's interesting with
how,
your book. So your book is about naming, and
yeah,
obviously it's something that's been very deep in you. And what does the book sort of what's its essence in a sentence or two?
yeah, it really talks about how our names are a marker of our self identity and how important they are.
Right.
And because for me, growing up, I was known by a name that actually wasn't my name in terms of it wasn't on my birth certificate. Mandy was never changed by Depot. Um, so it was about me reclaiming my name. And I suppose also, along with that, it's about reclaiming my Nigerianness, although that Nigerianness was tinged with an estranged father.
Yes.
You see what I
But
mean?
but it's still part of your essence, and actually you've been reclaiming yourself. It sounds
Yeah.
like for most of your life.
Yes,
Now,
absolutely.
now I
Yes.
know that you've been through some serious health issues, and that's been something that's really helped sort of shape you. So one of the adversities you've come through is how to manage the health issues. And I
Mm.
know they were mainly gynecological. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So from about the age of 10, I always had incredibly painful periods. And I think when you go to the doctor, especially back in in the 80s, your doctor was this man in a white coat behind a big desk, very intimidating. And I remember going to the doctors with my mum and trying to explain that I had incredibly, they were painful. I was vomiting. Sometimes the pain was so extreme I couldn't walk. And I remember one GP just saying, you'll grow out of it. It's something all women have. All women have pain. It's part of being a woman.
He sounds like a misogynist to me, but anyway, carry right on.
Completely, completely. And this was the case really growing up. I mean, I saw just a huge amount of GPs. He said the same thing, really. Suck it up, buttercup. It will go away. You'll get better. Don't complain about it. Um, and, the pain was getting just increasingly more extreme as I got older. And I had to mask the pain with, painkillers, or, I had to just deal with a huge amount of extreme pain. And there was no name for it. I assumed it was also just painful periods. But then when you talk to other women about their menstrual cycle, and they weren't having the same amount of pain I was having, so I knew something was wrong. And when I met Michael, Mike, my husband, I knew something was wrong. And I remember telling him that, something just doesn't feel right. And I think at that age, in my early 20s, I was concerned about fertility, but I was so young that I just thought I'd be fine, and things would kind of work themselves out like that.
You'd met the man that you were to marry, who you'd fallen in love with, and it
Yes,
sounds like a very healthy relationship from what you've described to me before.
yes.
But here you haven't replicated your mum and dad's relationship. You've actually created a strong relationship, and yet there's some suffering within the relationship that actually the relationship wasn't able to bear fruit effectively.
No. And so I was
Hmm.
diagnosed, I think in my 30s, early 30s, with endometriosis, and was told, well, the best cure is to get pregnant. But obviously, it's very difficult to get pregnant when you have endometriosis. So it was a very difficult journey for us. We wanted to have children, and I was also told that IVF would not work for me. My endometriosis was so severe that really the best route was adoption, which was something that we did look into, and subsequently didn't go down that path. Um, so it was having to deal with, and I suppose it's a continual process of not having children. And it is a loss, a huge loss. And I suppose for Mike and I, we had to go through a painful process of working out the kind of life we wanted to have without children in it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And was Michael sort of he went along with it and was sort of like solid as a rock with it?
Incredibly supportive, incredibly. I think it helps that Mike's an acupuncturist.
Aha.
Yeah. And so it was a journey we went through together. I never felt alone at all. I felt incredibly supported by him.
Yes.
And and I think we came, yeah, I mean it's because it's funny because friends of ours say, oh, you dealt so well with it. Um, but I think there is that idea, isn't there, that the cards you're dealt in life, you have to go through a process of, in our case, grieving for what we didn't have, and
That's
then coming out stronger the other side.
absolutely. No, that's very powerful. I remember one group that I was running at one time, and it never really struck me the pain of not being able to have children. And
Mm,
one of the women in the group dealt with the major issue of her life, which was not being able to have children, and went into some really deep grief. And it triggered in some of the other women in the group the same grief who also hadn't been able to have children. And I hadn't actually realized up to that point how profound that is for a woman. And it's almost like a part of her is not allowed to be in play. And they deal with it often with suppression. They
yeah,
deal with it with sort of like diversion by sort of creating big careers or something like that. But at the end of the day, it sits there. And I'm
yeah.
wondering how that impacted for you.
Yes, and you have to let it sit there for a while, and you have to let that pain sit there and the grief sit there. And I think for me, what really helped was yoga and a meditation practice.
So
Uh,
out of the struggle also comes the
yeah,
resourcing. You actually find the resources you need to be able to come through and not only survive this difficulty, but to thrive through it.
yes, hugely. And I think because I started meditating, um, Mike and I lived in Tokyo in our 20s, mid 20s, and I went along to a Vipassana meditation retreat in Kyoto, actually. And it was 10 days. And it was quite a thing because I'd not really done a huge amount of meditation before. So here I was, I sort of rocked to Kyoto, very thinking I can do this, I can meditate for long stretches of time. And obviously I couldn't. So for the first
Mhm.
couple of days I was in complete agony. I was 26, I think, at the time, And it was a real, but once I got through the pain of that, again, I just sat and learned to sit and learned to be very present and learned to be very quiet. And actually, I learned to be in my body. And I think that experience of Vipassana and then subsequently having a regular yoga practice and meditation practice really, I can't explain how much, but it really helped me through the process of not being able to have children.
But actually, that's exactly what we're looking at in this series, is how we actually get resourced and what those resources do for us. And I'm hearing that you found some very wise resources, because the other extreme of that would be to drink, would be
Yeah.
to use addictive substances, would be to find ways of blocking off
Mm.
from what's going on. In fact, what you did was you dived in
Yeah.
and found something in yourself.
Yeah.
And you probably and I'm guessing, so I'm sorry, I'm making an assumption here as well, but you probably wouldn't have gone down that road if things had been sort of sugary sweet and easy.
I don't know. I mean, I think I've always been quite non-conformist, quite interested in spirituality, interested in who I am as a person,
Yeah,
um, interested in what makes us human. So, yeah, I've always been interested in finding out about my own potential
yeah.
and my sense of self. So, yeah, possibly. Who knows? I think I would. I think I would have always started.
It
Definitely.
sounds like it's innate in you as well, and it's like, very often, like our gifts emerge. We are all blessed with different gifts,
Yeah.
and also different. It's almost, curses is the wrong word, but also different trials and tribulations that we go through as human beings.
Yeah. So I
But of
think that's
course, one of the ways in which we are most able to ride comfortably or ride wisely through this life is to find spiritual practice. And it
mm,
sounds like you did that in a big way.
yeah, I really did. And I think, and also I think having time out of the UK was really profound, had a profound effect on me, especially living in Asia, in Tokyo. Um, I think in your 20s to be in such a different culture um, really informed who I am today, actually, living in Asia. I was there for 5 years. And I think when you're out of your own environment, you have to be resilient. You know, you really have to rely on yourself and other people around you. But you're in a completely different environment and culture. And so I think that was hugely beneficial for me in my 20s. I'm really glad I was there from sort of 24 to 29 in Japan, learning about different styles of yoga, meditation, and different types of people. I met a
Yeah.
huge, vast array of people there. So, yeah, I think it was really formative.
And presumably Michael was sort of on a similar path, so that actually you were exploring together, which deepens the relationship rather than you pulling in one direction and him pulling in a different one.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. We're both interesting. Mike got into yoga before me, actually. And that's why initially I didn't want to go because I'd wake up and find him doing sun salutations in the kitchen and thinking, what's he doing? And then slowly I thought, oh, that looks quite cool. I'm going to try. So yeah, so it has been a journey that we've been on together. And yeah, I mean, I'm really lucky to have found Mike and
Yeah.
to have been on this journey of understanding and learning, holding hands with him throughout. You know, I'm not saying it's all been perfect, but we've
It
got through
never is.
it. You
Yeah,
know, we've
yes.
got through it. It never is there, but
But
you get through it, and we certainly have.
it's interesting because one of the sort of templates I've got for relationships is that we have to connect at an intellectual, an emotional, a
Mm,
physical, and a spiritual level. Physical is not just about sex; it's also about being in the world together. Now, if you were in
mm,
Tokyo together, or if you were in Japan together for 5 years, that's either going to really strengthen a relationship or cause a lot of rifts in it. And
yeah.
presumably that strengthened your relationship.
Hugely, massively strengthened our relationship. And that's why I think it was so interesting going out there after we'd just finished university. We met when we were at university, and then to be in a foreign country in your 20s, especially in the 90s, life was very different. There were no mobile phones. My parents couldn't FaceTime me. My mother, we just had letters. It was letter writing and phone calls. So you very much were on your own in terms of the friendships that you made and the relationship that I had with Mike. So we created our own little specific unit out there almost because we didn't have those forms of communication that you do now. It's funny because my nephews and nieces now say, oh gosh, I wish we were around in the 90s where you could just, go off and not have to necessarily feel like you want to send an email or a
Mm,
WhatsApp to a family member. You can just let them know you're okay and then
yes.
just get on with your life. Yeah.
One of the things I've written about in my book, Slay Your Dragons with Compassion, which the podcast has used the same title as that, is that one of the resources we have is the creation of Sangha, which is of spiritual community.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you and Mike have established a Sangha together. You'll also have your own, your own friends and your own sort of community, which I'm sure you've got. And perhaps we can take a look at that as well. But that for me feels like a super strength that we can get through the world with.
Yes, hugely. It really is. You really need that sense of support and sense of self and sense of belief and trust in other people as well, because fundamentally people are lovely, and you've got to just open yourselves up to human kindness also. Um, and
That's a very positive view you have of the world there, Camilla, as well, because I've often thought fundamentally people are bastards, So I don't think that now. I think that there's an extreme, and I
yeah,
think that some people are almost saintly, and others are sort of so damaged that they become very destructive. But actually, if you see people as lovely underneath, that's what you're going to be meeting out there as well.
yeah. I recognise that there are some bad ones in the world, and obviously, but I think, yeah, I try to see the good in people
Yeah.
as much as I can, and
Again, that's a practice. That's something that
yeah,
actually gives you strength by feeding on that, creates a neural pathway of
yeah,
good.
yeah. I hope so, and I hope people see the good in me. And as a very yoga teacher of ours, very wise yoga teacher said that in life, when you need them most, you'll find the angels in life.
That's lovely. Yes.
And it really stayed with me. And I thought, he's right, because that's happened a lot in my life that people step through the door that you just are just good, kind, and helpful. And I always remember this particular teacher's words. And yeah, it always really resonated with me that there are angels that just appear when you need them the most.
Mm.
And I think that's rather lovely, don't you?
I think it's amazing, and I agree with you as well. I think that people do come our way. It's like Jung said, everything is synchronicity. When
Mm,
synchronicity is right, people
mm,
come our way. And for example, if we go back to your health challenges,
mm,
we can look at all these the medics who actually didn't actually meet you where you needed to be met and
mm.
didn't find a way of helping you. But ultimately, presumably, you did find the person who was able to actually help you navigate this quite serious struggle.
Yes, and I also think with something like women's health, if you just sort of think about that for a moment, women haven't been listening to by the medical establishment for decades, have they? For so
Well,
long.
I don't think it's necessary. I think it's like it's our
Oh,
civilization has actually
yeah,
devalued women.
yes. And so even now, I was diagnosed with endometriosis in the 90s, and I don't think that much has changed for women with gynecological issues. I think it's still very difficult to get a diagnosis. I think lots of GPs still say you'll grow out of it. It's just period pain, um, which is incredibly sad, annoying, frustrating. I've read many memoirs and books around women's health, and yeah, the situation is quite dire still. Um, and I touch upon it in my book a little bit because my story named a story of reclaiming and reclaiming who you are is a real journey of naming, but it weaves in social commentary around health, around race, around identity, class, belonging, all those issues that have affected me in my lifetime.
Yes.
So although names are the central theme that hang the book together, it's actually about quite a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Um, and my journey with my health, yeah, I mean, it was tough, and I think for me, I was very lucky because very lucky. I mean, my endometriosis, what they call medically, burnt itself out. It got to a point where the pain just,
I was going to ask you that. So where are you now with it? But actually, it feels like
yeah,
you're on the other side.
yeah, completely healthy and don't have any pain, and so and that sort of from my 40s, early 40s onwards, things started to really shift. And I didn't go down any invasive medical surgeries. I was told to have a hysterectomy when I was very young and just thought, no,
Gosh.
I'm not.
Mm.
So for me, I mean, I use the word lucky with endometriosis. I just, like I say, I think I yoga, meditation, acupuncture, knowing that this would pass helped me.
It's interesting because you say it burnt itself out, but my guess is that somewhere along the way, you actually found a way of putting yourself in alignment that actually helped it pass through you as
I think
well.
that's probably, yeah, very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also, I saw a very interesting acupuncturist. I think I was in London, back in London at this point, and he asked a question no one had asked. And he said, well, why do you think you have endometriosis? Why do you think you have this pelvic pain? And I thought that was such an interesting question.
Well, it allows there to be a psychological realm as well to our illnesses.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't answer him straight away. I said, I don't know. I think I said, I don't know. And then I left his consultation room and then went back to my flat in I think we were living in London at the time, and just really thought about it and thought, well, why? Why have I got this pain? What's it telling me? Um, and I think maybe there were lots of emotional issues there around my dad, perhaps, around family estrangement, around maybe naming. Who knows? That I think sometimes our body can tell us or show us when there's a problem, when there's a blockage. I really do believe that. So
Yeah.
I went away really thinking, well, that's maybe why. Maybe that's why.
Yeah. That's lovely, Camilla. So we're coming towards the end of our podcast, and it's been really lovely conversation. Considering we've never had a proper conversation, we've only met once online before, and but I just feel like I know you quite well from today's exploration. And the question I ask at the end of the podcast is, what's the particular dragon you've had to slay? What's the hurdle you've had to overcome to be who you are?
Wow. Well, I think a big one for me actually is around reclaiming my birth name, actually.
So hence the book, and hence your real exploration. You're diving deep into that as well.
Yes. Yeah, I think that has been huge. And actually taking ownership of my identity in that the name on my birth certificate is who I am, not a name that my mum just happened to just like because it had two syllables, Mandy. And really taking my name back, I think, has been a journey and a half because it encapsulates issues around identity and my dad and my Nigerian background. And now I think I'm my mother and father's daughter. I really feel
So you've actually found the way of weaving it all together through all of the adventures and struggle you've had to go
absolutely,
through. Yes.
yeah.
So
So I
much for
think
being
I've
with us.
really, you're welcome. I've really enjoyed it, Malcolm. Really
Yeah.
lovely talking to you.
Lovely. Thank you very
Thank,
much, Camilla.
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Take care.